Welcome back to my series where I make you some food and talk about the history behind it. Today's star ingredient? The tomato. So what's the big deal with tomatoes? These are practically found in every grocery store, they're pretty much in every recipe, and they're one of the most popular plants found in people's gardens. Nowadays, you would never even suspect that this little thing has had such a controversial history. Today, I am going to be making shakshuka, a delicious and nutritious breakfast recipe said to have originated in Tunisia and popular in North Africa and the Middle East. There are many different types of tomatoes that can be used for this recipe. So here I have two different types of tomatoes, a grape tomato and a cherry tomato, and you can tell the difference even though they're both small because the grape tomatoes are more oval shaped and the cherry tomatoes are rounder. Next we have beefsteak tomatoes, and these can get really big. Some can even weigh up to a pound. And I'm not sure, but I think these are heirloom variety as well. Here, as you can see, we have canned tomatoes and salsa. Now, shakshuka was invented all the way back in the mid-1500s, but in most modern recipes, you will find that they use canned tomatoes instead of fresh ones. This is because the canned tomatoes are already quickly cooked before they are canned, so when you're making something that needs to simmer, these are good for a quick cooking time. And so now here I have some salsa, and this is not traditional shakshuka. Actually, I picked this up from when I was making huevos rancheros because it adds a nice flavor, and we are going to be using tomato, we're going to be using onion, garlic, it already has all of it in it. It just adds an extra kick. Here are all of the ingredients we will need today. I'm going to start by dicing the onion and bell pepper. I actually already have onion that I cut up, so I'm just going to use that. So why were tomatoes so controversial? Well, actually, in Europe, they were considered to be poisonous for around 200 years, and there are a few reasons as to why. The first, well, tomatoes are classified as part of the nightshade family. Now, you might have heard of belladonna, which is also known as deadly nightshade and also known as very toxic. So people thought that tomatoes were probably also toxic as well. In reality, many common foods are part of the nightshade family, including bell peppers, potatoes, eggplants, and jalapenos. But that wasn't the only reason. I'm going to saute the onion and bell pepper in some olive oil until they soften. There was also something really strange going on with aristocrats who ate tomatoes. Most of them would get sick and die, and this happened so often that the tomato was dubbed the poison apple. Well, it turns out that the explanation for this was pretty simple. What happened was that the aristocrats were eating the tomatoes off of pewter plates, which back then were made with high amounts of lead. So really, it was lead poisoning that was doing them off. Once the onions and bell peppers have cooked for a bit, I'm going to mix some garlic and add it in along with the paprika, cumin, and chili powder. Now, even though Europe had been avoiding the plant, tomatoes had actually been eaten in Mesoamerica since the 8th century. Around 800 years later, the plant was brought to Europe by the Spanish conquistadors, and in Britain, it was mostly grown as an ornamental plant for a really long time because, of course, people thought that it was too poisonous to eat. This lasted until the 1800s and even carried over into the British colonies that eventually became the United States. Some brave farmers grew them, like Thomas Jefferson, but even after people started eating the plant, people were still wary of them. Apparently, there was a bug that liked to live in the tomato plants that people were so afraid of that they thought one touch could outdo a person. Even the famous writer Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote about his fear of the creatures. By the end of the 1800s, however, tomatoes had become very popular. Joseph Campbell, whose name you might recognize, made his fortune by canning tomato soup. But with the acceptance of tomatoes came another hurdle. What do you think? Are tomatoes fruits or vegetables? Because this argument actually went all the way to the US Supreme Court. And guess what? The decision was unanimous. The court agreed that while technically and botanically tomatoes are considered fruits, since they're eaten along with dinner and along with savory foods, they will be considered as vegetables under customs law and taxed as such. And now for the final step, I will make a well and crack this egg into the center of the sauce. Actually, correction, I'm gonna need 2 eggs. Today, tomatoes are an essential part of almost every country's cuisine. In 2023, the tomato seed market in the US was $1.19 billion, and it is only projected to increase from there. And I can't say I'm not happy about that because I love tomatoes. goodness, look at that. Absolutely. The spices are so incredibly warming, the salsa adds a nice kick, and the egg was perfectly runny. This was really, really good. I probably will eat this whole thing. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!